If you've never had roast goose, you're in for a treat. In this video, I'm showing you how to prepare it complete with a rich, savory gravy and perfectly braised cabbage. Follow along so you too will end up with a tender, juicy goose, deeply flavorful gravy, and sweet, tangy cabbage to bring a little old world charm to your table. This is the goose that I found. I was able to find it locally. It was frozen and I had thawed it in a big bucket of water overnight. It can sometimes be a little challenging to find geese locally, and you can always go online. Just be warned, they are not exactly cheap. This is roastgoose.com. I thought it was a really good goose, really fatty, and that's what you really want in a goose. And to prepare it, I like to wash it a little bit inside out, and then I'm gonna try to find all the innards. Not every bird comes with them. I was hoping that this one would have them. So I'm gonna fish for the heart and the kidneys and what else is in there? The neck for sure, and I think one more. The liver, yes, how could I forget the liver? And you can either make something with that, you can roast them in a saute pan, or sometimes we just give it to our dog, but that's what I am gonna do with the innards. You definitely need to fish them out because they will be really hard to get out once you start roasting this bird. Again, washing it on the inside, washing all the blood out and whatever, and I could already feel that it was really greasy, and again, that's exactly how I like it because then it actually gets a lot more tender. In my roasting pan, which I'm gonna leave a link for below where to find it, I patted it dry, and my family has always used mugwort, which is a bitter herb, but it makes all the fat from the goose a little bit easier to digest. And I like to fill the inside with it before I'm gonna make it. In my roasting pan, I'm filling the bottom with water. And this is my family's sort of secret, not so secret recipe to actually make it a day ahead of time. And I'm gonna salt it. Not that it will actually stick, but a lot of people also like to salt the inside of the bird. I don't do that so much, but some people even love to fill it with apples and other herbs. I wanted to close the sides, and for that I'm using just regular toothpicks, and I'm going to show you in just a moment that it's really easy to make it look pretty and to close the sides, especially if you're putting some filling into your goose, which again, I did not do, but apples would be a really good choice. So I'm just putting the toothpicks through, and then I have some twine. You can use cooking twine or just regular twine, and looping it around each toothpick and then twisting in the middle and then looping around, and you'll see that it creates a really nice pattern and keeps the toothpicks securely attached in the goose. All that to say, I'm gonna just close that off with a regular knot and a bow, and then I am ready to actually put this bird in the oven at 350 degrees, and basically with a lid on, I'm just gonna steam it. And when I asked my late mother-in-law how long, she said until the bird smelts. So I'm saying about an hour and a half. Quintessential in my book is braised red cabbage, and I found a head of cabbage that I'm gonna prepare right now while the goose is in the oven roasting. And I didn't have the goose fat, which would be perfect to saute the onions in, so I just used some ghee, I think I did. And this is my head of cabbage. It was super fresh, and as you can see, it's really crisp and not very easy to cut. And for me, that's a sign of a fresh cabbage head. That's exactly what you want. I'm just gonna cut it in quarters, and then I'll just chop it very finely. You can also use a mandolin, but I don't mind doing that with a knife because surprisingly enough, this goes pretty fast and pretty easy, and you can determine how thick you want your cabbage cut. My onions are nicely sauteed, and here you can see the cabbage, how I'm chopping it and The finer, I think, the better, but it doesn't matter if you have some thicker pieces in it. And I'll simply add that to my sauteing onions. Really easy, really simple. Just add that, and then I'm going to saute the cabbage just as well until all the head of cabbage is cut up. You will probably need more than you think you do because this will sink in quite a bit. Cabbage works really well with an apple, and apple also goes really well with a goose. So here is a common theme. And I could have actually in the end added 2 apples to my cabbage, but I just had 1 apple, and tart is always good. I think we just had some Fuji apples, but you know, any apple you can find is gonna work well in this recipe. And you don't need to worry about how finely you chop it. You just chop it and then it's gonna kind of fall apart. I like to add some cloves. Don't worry about adding whole cloves because they will cook down. You will not feel them. And sometimes I like to add some allspice. Then I'll give this a good stir. This is sauteing as I'm making. I'm adding just a little bit water, put the lid on, and let that cook for about an hour. You can see how much the cabbage has sunken in and shrunk. And this is when I was thinking, well, maybe it's not enough for the people at my table. Let's check up on the goose. Let's see what it's doing. This is about an hour and a half at 350. And to me, it looks perfect. It has released a lot of its fat, which is actually a good thing. And I'm gonna let that sit overnight because that's what I do the day before, let it sit, and then I can also gather some of the fat. This is the next day. Before I'm gonna roast it, I just preheated my oven again, and I'll salt it and put it back in the oven. Some of the goose fat has become a little bit solid, and that's why I haven't drained it yet. And I'll put that in there and probably just roast it again at 350 for at least half an hour. Now that the goose has released even more fat, I want to gather the fat because it's really delicious. You can use it for a lot of recipes. Sauteing, it's one of the really good animal fats, just like lard or tallow. And it's actually not so difficult to just keep the goose with one thumb. You can see that holding on the leg and draining the fat out. And you might be surprised how much will come out of it. Of course, some of it is the water that I initially poured in the roasting pan, but a lot of it, most of it actually is fat. It's quite amazing, but that makes it so juicy and so tender, all this fat. I'm gonna reuse this fat and you'll see in a moment what I'm gonna do with it, but I actually ran out of jars to fill the juices and the fat in, and I have here 2 big ones, and I wanna say I got almost a quart or so out of it. I'm gonna put the goose back in with a lid for just a little bit to keep on roasting, and I probably wanna go for a total of another hour, not quite an hour and a half. Before I put it back in, I'm taking the lid off and adding a little bit more fat on the top because I want the skin to be really crisp, and that's why I'm pouring some of the fat over it. It's not gonna, make it overly greasy, but just create a really nice brown, crispy skin. And for the last half hour or so, I don't have the lid on, 350 on roasting, and I'll put that back in there. Let's check on it and see what it's looking like. I think it looks perfect. And now I'm gonna make the gravy. Again, I could have used the goose fat, but I'm just using some butter here and flour to make a simple roux with the goose fat and the goose juices. So I'm gonna roast this a little bit in my saucepan here, and then I'm gonna add some of the goose juices to it that I've collected. I've drained some of the fat off, and this has all the flavor in it, and because of the salt, it has some seasoning to it, but it's just really all of the goose flavors in these juices. And that's gonna be the base of my gravy. You can never have enough gravy, trust me on that one. I usually don't make enough. I'm adding some German Maggi. It's one of the German spices, and then some cube of beef bouillon just for a little bit more seasoning and spicing and to give it a little bit more flavorful taste. Some pepper and some Himalayan salt. And here is the roast goose, and eating it with the cabbage, dumplings, and gravy.